he was going to be used in the United States, it would be disclosed to the entity that employee was participating in a government thing, whether it's the Bureau or somebody else going and explaining it. But it's not like they're just hiding us in these companies and nobody knows in a nefarious way.
But if they went to explain that, would they be legally able to tell said company, like, by the way, you have to keep this confidential? Or couldn't the company technically be like, the government just told us this dude's working for them?
Well, it depends on the status, right? So it is a felony to disclose the identity of an officer, right? So
even if you're not in?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so like if somebody in the public knew about the identity of an agency officer that was working at the time, you're not allowed to like tell everybody.
Really?
Yeah, it's a crime.
I never knew that.
Mm-hmm.
It's good to know.
Yeah.
You never know who you're going to run into
Right.
with this shit.
Right. Yeah.
There's a lot of you guys out there. Okay. Yeah, because we all know the bad shit the CIA's done, and we talk about that shit all the time on the show, whether it be MK Ultra, potentially whacking a fucking president, definitely whacking a fucking president, things like that, you know. But I am a realist. You talked about the gray area earlier. I'm very much a guy who lives in the gray. I recognize that, like, the people who are pissed about everything about the CIA, who are like, defund the CIA. Well, that's probably not the brightest move. That said, I also recognize why, like this scenario I'm thinking of, I can't give details of it. That might make it easier for people. But I fully understand why the CIA would have wanted to have someone there, because it had nothing to do with the company. The company was doing nothing wrong. Had nothing to do with them, and had to do with the fact that they do business around the world. And there were some bad people who, completely unbeknownst to them, could take advantage of some things. And the CIA basically just said, don't worry about it. You know, we want to cover that up. Yet this is supposed to be something that's like not legal. I don't really understand that when we live in a global world now where everything's connected. Like, technically, you kind of have to do things. There's no way around doing things in the United States, no?
Right. And so there's overlaps to where you have to notify. So there were federal people that knew when I would be in the United States, and the Attorney General's office knew of some stuff as well. And so I've been in states where the special agent in charge, you know, like for the DEA, for instance, had known about that. We had to disclose, like, hey, this guy's working here, right? So there's all kinds of lawyers that get involved in this, and they try to play it by the book more than people would think.
You ride by the office, give them a little salute.
Right.
What's up, DEA? Fuckos.
Yeah.
That's funny. Okay. So this first year, you can't say how you were getting placed to do certain things, but you're doing certain things basically to establish yourself as what your skill set is, money laundering. Mm-hmm. And then you end up in this bar, which you already also explained was because you were trying to be seen in places like that.
Right.
And you fall into this, you know, I guess like the luckiest lottery winner in the bar.
Pretty much. Where
this dude, completely unbeknownst to you, turns out to be in a top 4 biker gang.
Yeah.
Now that you
got a senior officer in it.
He was a senior officer.
Not just a guy. He was a senior officer in that organization.
Was there any, like, was he wearing, like, bling like you or something that you could tell, like, he was loaded? No.
He looked like a normal Joe.
Wow. All right, so he was a good criminal.
Yeah.
All right, so now that you're told that information by your people, actually, real quick, how would you communicate? If you're off the books and everything, how does that even work to communicate with base without revealing classified information?
Sure. They're just classified types of technology that would be used for me to communicate, or I would physically just meet with my boss during this time.
Like Leo and The Departed kind of deal.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So I'd have a clandestine meeting with somebody to pass the information along.
And in that first year, you know, before we get to this biker guy, this is your first year in the role. You actually are being baptized by fire. You already mentioned the incident in the bathroom. That sounds scary as fuck. You found your way out of that. Good job. But, like, you know, you had mentioned there's some mistakes that are made, and there's moments where you think, oh, shit. Like, did you have anxiety off the charts just while you're adjusting to now being actually out in the field? Or how did you actually process moving into the role officially?
I think you just give yourself to it as much as possible, right? And so all these hesitations that the real you would have, these don't exist. That's not how this persona thinks, right? So you just dive into it and you build in things that help your mind. Right?
Like what?
Like bravado, like how somebody would handle a certain situation, right? So when you're working cover like that, you are constantly planning. When I go in here, if this person says this, I'm going to say that. If they say this, I'm going to say that. If this happens, I'm going to do that. You don't want to think of these things as they're happening. You want to consider as many potential scenarios as possible and think through what your reaction would be, whether that's what you say back or, you know, what you do physically. But yeah, there were some mistakes. And one of the things I realized early on was I didn't know shit about riding motorcycles, and that's going to be a problem. So I found this guy who was a tweaker, and he'd been like just Mr. Harley Davidson his whole life. And I didn't know it at the time, but he kind of he didn't look like a real outlaw. He looked like a wannabe or like an undercover cop. But you know, he had like 50 patches all over him that said, you know, like clever little phrases and stuff like that. And this guy, everybody called him Teeth. That was his nickname because he had like 3 of them. And he was a maniac.
How'd you find him?
Hanging out in the bar,
okay.
Right? And so he wasn't one of the made dudes, but I needed somebody that I could ask questions to without them getting like too bristly about it. And this guy, when he would drink, you could not shut him up. So I could ask him.
That's a winner for you.
Anything. And he used to carry this plastic whiskey jug in his saddlebag on his bike, and he would sip on it like at a red light. This guy was wild. Like he was all about it. I almost got into trouble with him a couple of times was the mistake, right? So where I was at, there had been a big gang-on-gang shooting. I think 9 or 10 people had died in it recently. So everybody that was in that world was on very high alert at the time. And he's showing me how to ride my bike and kind of mentoring me a little bit and, you know, his criminal ways, his very low-level criminal ways. And he's like, hey, let's, you know, on Saturday, let's meet up early. We'll go bar hopping. I'll show you around town. And I'm thinking, oh, this is going to be fantastic. So it's like 11 in the morning on a Saturday, and we take off. And he takes me to this first bar. It's not a bar. It's a tiny house. And there's like picnic tables out front, a big parking lot, this gravel parking lot. And there's like 8 or 9 guys sitting at these picnic tables outside. And so we pull up next to all these bikes. He backs in. I'm like, wow, this is an interesting place. And we're walking up to this bar, hypothetically. And all these guys have this look on their face like you just asked, you know, what color their sister's panties were or something. Just a mixture of confusion and anger. And we go in. It's not a bar. There's like a regular fridge, you know, like from Walmart in there. There's no bar top. There's a couple pool tables and a bunch of signs that indicate like this is one of the gangs. It wasn't a public bar. It was their clubhouse. And so right after we get in, he grabs a beer, and of course these guys are coming in to ask us, what the fuck are you doing here? And so he's playing hard to get with them, and I don't know why he's like toying with this guy because he's pretty much about to get his brake speed off. And then all of a sudden he points at the wall, and there's a picture of like this old member like from the 80s or whatever, and this little kid. He's like, I'm that little kid. That's my dad. His dad was a member of the club formerly. But he thought it was funny. He played this out for like 10 minutes while they're looking to, you know, beat the heck out of us.
Oh, he just enjoyed it.
He thought it was the funniest thing. But I was like,
what are
wow.
you? And the whole time, what are you doing? Just like, I barely know him.
Yeah, who the fuck is this guy? You know,
yeah,
like,
fuck.
Yeah, somebody call about the electrical work here. You know. Like,
yeah. Is this after like? Because you said you knew nothing about bikes or biking or anything. Had he been, I guess, like taking you on bikes and you picking up things at this point from him? Yeah,
so I knew how to ride a motorcycle. I didn't know how to ride a motorcycle like you're in a club, like as aggressively as they ride. And I mean, he rode too aggressively. You know, he'd been arrested like, I don't know, 300 times probably in his life. And he ended up, it wasn't like a go and blow or something like that, but he'd have to check in at his house like on a schedule, right? For some like part of his release or his parole or whatever.
Right.
And so he tried to time when he would drink so that he'd be ready again. And then like, as soon as he checked in, he'd go get some more. And so we're shooting pool. This is later that night. And all of a sudden he gets a call from his wife. And we were like maybe like 5 minutes from his house at this point. And she's like, you better get home. You missed it. Like, he's in trouble. She's like, the cops are going to be coming. It looks like Tasmanian devil just like spinning out of the bar. Like there's a dust cloud that's left. He gets on his bike. So I run out after him. It had to be 30, 40 seconds later after he took off. Here come these 2 squad cars like behind him.
Whoa.
So I get in behind them, like fall into the house. He was so drunk because he'd been drinking all day. He parks his bike. The cops are getting out. He jumps into the front yard and tags it like it's home base. Like, nope, I was here. You didn't see me anywhere else. When you arrested me, I was at my house. So he was.
And you're just watching this from behind.
Yeah, like this guy might get me in trouble.
But he was your lefty Ruggiero.
Exactly.
He was useful to learn the ropes.
Yep.
Okay.
Stepping stone.
But again, like would you say you were used to it pretty quickly? Used to being this guy and putting on this role?
Yeah.
When you talked about like going over every scenario of what's said and what you'll say back, I'm just thinking of a random 10, 15-minute meeting you could have with some international criminal. That could be a million things.
Yeah.
How do you even possibly plan that? Like, I don't plan out, before I come in here, I mean, you see how this is. I don't plan out anything. I just go with the flow. But the stakes aren't that, like, you might shoot me at the end of this because I'm made.
Right.
You know what I mean? Those are the stakes for you. How do you even process all that and then, like, put it to work in a believable way when someone says something and you're like, ooh, that was number 27 on my list. Let me put that one out there now.
Yeah, so when you're building your cover, there are key elements of it that you need to be able to defend. And so you have categories of questions that would, penetrate that cover. Like, do you work for the agency?
Right.
Is a question that you probably should think of what you should answer before. But a lot of it is, and as you get better at it as you go, what you get good at doing is steering people away from ever asking you the questions that you don't want to be in a conversation with. Like,
how would you do that?
You can do topic changes. Usually humor is a good way to transition between topics or to bring up something, that's more important. Like if you see the conversation heading a certain way, that's what's important to them, right? They want the conversation to get there. You need to introduce something that's more important than getting there.
On the spot.
Topic. Yeah. And also people, even that are criminals, they don't generally want to be rude, right? And so you can force somebody into feeling very, very rude to circle back around and ask you a pointed question, right? You can set that up to where that would be unnatural for them to do that.
Your character that you're playing during these years, how similar from a words per minute standpoint is he to you right now?
He spoke faster.
Spoke a little faster. Mm-hmm. Spoke a lot more?
Less. But louder.
Louder, faster, and less.
The exact opposite of what like Jim Lawler's voice sounds like.
Got it. Okay. Can you turn that voice on right now?
To just like talk fast and be more aggressive?
Yeah, so how would you talk? I'm a criminal. Mm-hmm. But I am a middleman for the cartel moving cocaine, in charge of transporting the cocaine once it gets across the border from the border to LA. Okay.
Yeah, what are we talking about?
We're talking about why
you're wasting my fucking time right now?
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah. So the time thing is what I would focus on, right? Like, So if I'm going to talk faster, it's going to be because my time is important to me. And so I don't want to be sitting here all day spending all this fucking bullshit time on this when I don't have it. Like, if you don't have what we need, then get the fuck out of here. Right? You don't want to sit back, right, and just, like, take it, right? You got to be the person in the room.
I gave you your 20 kilos. You're telling me I need 30 now, but that's
I'm
not
not
the
telling
agreement
you
we came
anything.
to.
I'm not telling you anything. We already set down what happened. We don't even need to discuss it right now. It's already been brought up.
Who brought
Let's
it
just
up?
fix it up. I brought it up. That's why I'm here. Why
With who? The big guy?
Why the fuck else am I here? No, the Easter Bunny sent me here. So
All right. I see. The reason I asked that is because I want to know how much you're very good at making someone have to move the conversation along, but also move it in the direction you want, right? Because that's also that is my job title in all fairness.
Yeah.
But it's not that much different in the world when someone else is coming into the room and you both have some sort of goal that has to get accomplished here. Right. They need you, just like I need you to be good today, which you're doing a great job, by the way. But I need you to kind of go through your shit. They need you to go through the business shit or something like that. So I'm getting to see what that's like making me have to do today on my end, and I'm trying to imagine what they might have felt like in some of these scenarios where it involves, let's call it what it is. It's criminal work, but it's business. Right? It makes sense to me, like why that would have been pretty natural to you, because you're very what's the term? Your pitch is very consistent too. That makes people feel comfortable, kind of like a radio operator, a little bit. Yeah. I would imagine that's probably one of the reasons they liked you.
Perhaps.
Yeah. Okay. So you get used to this role. Now we're back to the biker guy in the bar. How do you, once you are told who he is, you start making friends with Teeth to learn the ropes and everything before you make an approach. How did you determine it was time to make the approach, and how did you do it?
So I didn't make the approach. They approached me.
Oh.
And I used Teeth to make this happen because Teeth can't keep his mouth shut. And so anything, like we talked about before, those avenues to pass information, right? Teeth was my avenue. I knew that anything I told him would get repeated. And so I didn't have to say it directly to anybody. And so I leaked things that were valuable to them, right? Like a skill set, right? Like being able to move money, right? So I get drunk enough one night and I just happen to tell Teeth, that I can do this money thing.
Did you give him like examples of how you? Okay.
Yeah.
So then he tells them. Now
Right.
what
he doesn't betrays my confidence, right?
Right. But you wanted him to.
Right.
Was it the guy himself who made the approach to you, or was it someone else?
It was someone much more junior.
Okay. How did that go down?
They just came up and said, like, hey, would you like to come around more often and meet some of the people and hang out? So the first phase in that world is being a hang around, right? So they just asked me to be there, invited me instead of me showing up uninvited all the time was the first step.
Do you still have that corporate cover?
Yeah.
And they know that?
Yep.
So they know you work for some company, but they're like, this guy does some shit on the side.
Yeah, which is what they're all doing, right? Yeah. A lot of those guys have straight jobs.
Really?
Yeah.
Even in that?
Yeah. I mean, they got
when you say straight jobs, like running a liquor store?
Dentist, lawyer.
They got dentists and lawyers?
Yeah, and outlaw motorcycle clubs, yeah.
Really?
Yeah.
Are they like disguised?
Yeah, I mean, so a lot of times one thing you'll see if you look at like pictures of a big club where they're all together, sometimes people have their back turned like with a hoodie up. Some people will be facing the camera. That could be because, somebody's got warrants. It could also be because they've got a job that they think they'll get fired from if they're...
Alessi, can you pull up a picture of Hell's Angels biker gang? Because that's one of the big four, right?
That is one of the big four, yes.
Okay, Hell's Angels biker gang group photo. Let's see if we can pull one online that they have. I've never looked at this. That's interesting. All right. Oh, yeah, get that. No.
I mean, you can see, like, on the second row, everybody's doing it. Right?
Oh, yeah. Look, Wu hung out at the Hell's Angels.
Yeah, they're taking the picture in reverse.
And one guy's got his tattoo showing. Nice job. Mm-hmm. Okay.
And it's this, so if you look at the bottom rocker there for the territories and stuff, you see like Belgium and it was that international presence that was what was helpful for me. Because again, I'm not trying to do a law enforcement op on these guys. I need the international excuse to be somewhere that's not the United States to do my real job.
Oh, shit. I keep forgetting about that.
My day job, yeah.
Yeah. So one of the things that guy was talking about earlier, the other knock, who may or may not come in here at some point, when he was approached to do his thing, it was because he had access to someone really powerful. And then they thought he had good personality traits, obviously. But he immediately said, "Oh no, fuck that. I'm not snitching on someone I know. Find someone else, whatever." They're like, "No, snitch. We don't want you to snitch. We want you to work with them.
Right.
We want the access." So CIA is telling you, break whatever laws you want. Do what you got. Why do you hesitate?
There were some laws that you could not break, like homicide, for instance. Like I couldn't kill somebody in a street fight in the United States.
Now, is that because we're on camera?
No, that was off limits, right? So this is the Attorney General's letter I was telling you about. It specifies specifically what activities you are not allowed to engage in.
You said in the United States.
Right.
But if you're somewhere else.
I mean, yeah, killing people anywhere without being ordered to is definitely not on the menu at any point of it. So,
unless your life is in danger.
Sure, it's the same for an undercover law enforcement officer.
Okay, so essentially, though, the CIA has no interest in sharing with their FBI counterparts what you're finding out or shit that's going on. In fact, they want this all to continue because with a gang like this, whatever one of the big four you were in, you are going to be able to go around the world, and I'm going to throw out a random country. Let's use Russia again. You may be able to go to Russia. And in Russia, because of your skill set, you may be able to steal some, nuclear documents because you're there. Mm-hmm. That's basically, I'm on the right track.
That's the scenario, right? Okay. And it would be extremely unlikely that the local security service in that scenario thought that I was working for who I was.
Right.
That's not.
Because you're in a biker gang.
Yeah.
Now, how, bikery did you get?
I had a goatee that came down to here and shaved my head. And
oh, you shaved your head?
It wasn't a good look. A lot of, they say this with the disguise stuff too, right, at the agency. When you go into disguise, you're going to look different, not better, right? So
right.
It definitely didn't enhance my sex appeal at all. But
you got in so young. Are you single during this whole time?
Yeah. You'd have to be.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, I guess you don't have to be, but it'd be pretty dang difficult.
It'd be very difficult to be able to maintain any kind of relationship.
Yeah.
But are you meeting any women along the way just to take care of your needs?
I mean, you meet a lot of women in that that scene, and you get treated like a rock star when you're made in that world. So that was one of the interesting things about getting out and dropping that cover and that persona is overnight I went from getting treated extremely well by men respect you, women want to be with you, to just little old you. All of a sudden I'm like, why aren't people holding the door for me? Why are these women not throwing themselves at me across the room all of a sudden? But
yeah. Okay. And how long did you spend with the biker gang?
3.5 years.
And during that whole time, are you doing all kinds of money laundering things for them, or are you also doing other things?
Other things as well.
What kinds of things?
I worked at a strip club for them for a little bit.
Nice.
Just doing low level stuff for them. I was involved in narcotics stuff with them at times, but mostly my contribution was the money stuff.
What's the nature the narcotics? What are their roles? Are they just distributors? Or I shouldn't say distributors, street distributors. Are they smugglers essentially?
Everything from the bottom up you can
really?
Think of, because it's not as mandated or organized as everybody might think. You might get a guy that's got, a connect in Mexico where he's moving metric tons a year, but you might get somebody else that's barely scraping by selling meth, out of the back of the strip club. It's not a consistent thing across all the members.
Okay.
And not everybody in there is even involved, right? There are people that aren't committing that crime that are in the organization too.
Did you ever do things with them, whether it be in the narcotics or something else, where you understood this is part of the role, this is what you got to do, but you had real mixed emotions about the downstream effects of what you were doing?
Yeah, sure. Yeah. Yeah, I thought about that a lot. Really, yeah.
I mean, not to hit too close to home or anything here, but you know where I'm going.
I know exactly where you're going.
Yeah, like your brother obviously was murdered by somebody. That's what that is. And his life was taken because of substances, and then you're involved in moving some substances.
Yeah, yeah. So there was definitely a weight. You know, you feel like a hypocrite a little bit, but you're always trying to see the bigger picture.
Right.
Right. You know, you got to stay focused on that and not get too deep on the thought you're just talking about.
Yeah. How could you ever turn off, like, during those 3.5 years? Like, could you ever go home off the clock and suddenly just be like, all right, I'm mad again. Fuck these people. No, you're that guy.
Yeah.
Did you ever feel like you were becoming that guy?
Absolutely. Well, and I'll share something with you. You know, so I said you tweak the personality stuff a little bit. And one thing that really struck me emotionally was not just that people seemed to like me better when I was in my persona than who I was before I joined, but also I liked me better in some ways as well. You know, like felt better to be that person than yourself at times.
Did you ever feel like you were losing yourself, though, because of that?
I didn't ever feel like I was losing my base, like my morals, my, you know, who I am at a core. But as far as being recognizable in my personality type, completely different. Like if the people I went to high school with, you know, saw me later in life, they'd be like, oh my gosh, how did this person end up being that person?
Wow.
But you're making those, you know, really subtle, almost imperceivable changes over time that are just huge after you add up years and years and years of doing it.
You're saying you never lost the moral compass, though, which maybe I'm taking this a step too far, so pull me back if I am. But that would therefore mean that you never got, even when you're doing the work that involves bad things, you never got lost in actually for a minute snapping in and thinking, oh, this is the right thing. Meaning like you didn't switch teams in a way. You always knew that was wrong.
Yeah, I never had the sense like I was going to go native, is
Right.
what they refer to that as. I never had the fleeting thought of not being loyal to my country or being involved in certain things that were like hard break, you know, lines for me, like child sex trafficking or whatever.
Yeah.
You know, it's never. So those things I didn't lose, but everything else changes. Yeah.
So but that's interesting. You had a moral line with things, and yet you're literally the most deniable elite type of spy that the CIA has. And I say this because this is not a CIA thing. This is literally any big name agency around the world. There are horrible things that they have to facilitate sometimes, and it includes that stuff.
Yeah.
You know, that stuff makes me sick, and I'm very glad I don't have a job where I got to make those types of decisions. But did you run scenarios with yourself where you might run into something like that and prepare yourself for the fact that you might have to let that happen?
Yes. And there were times where I was in the room when things were happening that I wanted to stop, you know, that who I really was on the inside is saying like, you know, you need to hero stop this scenario from happening to somebody, and you can't.
What's a scenario like that?
So fast forwarding to working with one of the Mexican drug trafficking organizations, or cartels, I was out partying with some of these people, and I get taken back to one of their warehouses, and we're going to like party more after it. But it wasn't that. It was a setup. There was something happening there that was extremely violent, and there was a child involved in it. And they wanted to see how I would react. And you could tell because as I'm coming in to seeing this horrific scene, they're all just staring at my face. Right?
And you know that's what this is.
Yeah, as soon as I saw that we weren't going back there to, you know, polish off a few last beers before the night was over, I knew it was a test.
How would you mentally prepare yourself for that?
You got to compartmentalize, you know, a lot of things. And in that scenario, the most important thing is not doing what they're hoping that you're going to do, right? And you really have to just focus as much as possible.
This comes back to your core, though, as you self-described it, and I believe you. Very empathetic individual. We all know the weakest spots for having our empathy overtake us involve vulnerable people,
right?
Not the least of which is kids.
Yep.
So you have to override your most deep internal trait in the most intense, worst scenario possible.
Right.
And I would imagine this isn't 2 minutes.
No, it's maybe, I don't know, it felt like years, but maybe 10 minutes long that I was exposed to it.
And you don't want to say what it was.
Moment. I mean, you might want to edit it out later. I'll say it, but
say it.
If you want to edit it out later.
Yeah.
They were taking a carrot peeler to this kid's face. The person's father had messed up with something, and they were punishing the father of his child. Yeah, like I was saying, there's big boy rules, for some of this stuff.
There's a line I think about a lot. I've had Bustamante in here a bunch of times. And the second time we ever recorded episode 107, there was, like, we were having some whiskey that night, like, really having fun going at it, but some of it got serious. And I was really pressing him on this scenario of, like, good versus bad, say, like, constitutionalism over the alternative and stuff like that.
Okay.
And it was a crazy moment because in this job, one of the reasons I love to do it and will only do it in person is because I can really feel the other person. Just like you feel the empathy kind of thing, that's my gene too. And there's this thing that happens very rarely where I quite literally see someone's soul leave their body and just they're on they're on a pre-programmed like thing comes out. And this happened with him where he said it, I had mentioned something about like a terrorist, and he said, "You mentioned that terrorist? I've lived that. You have not lived that." And I was just like, whoa. And he starts going in this speech. He's like, "I've seen that shit, where someone's baby gets microwaved, or and he names all these awful things." Yeah. And what he was saying is, you can't get rid of that hard drive. It's baked in. There's no like sitting in a therapist's office for 10 years. 5 years after this happens and trying to delete it, there's no Control-Alt-Delete. It's there. So when you just described that to me, I could see you seeing that again.
Yeah. It's never going to go away.
Does that haunt? Is that the kind of thing that like haunts your dreams?
The things that bother me or where I thought I could have done more or been better or it's not maybe the stereotypical things. I think about stuff like that we just talked about from time to time, but more consistently, I think I still go over scenarios in my head where I could have delivered that line a little bit better when I was working, or maybe I could have worked a little bit harder and not had to use somebody else in that, in a negative way.
Sure.
Yeah.
Now, during this 10 minutes or whatever that this hell is going on, they're watching for your reaction. They're watching to make sure that you just stand there stoically, nothing.
Yeah, they want to see a very sociopathic response.
Right. Is there any scenario where they tell you got to join in?
Not for me, it wasn't, thank God.
But there were other people in there they did that with.
Yeah.
And they all did it?
No, most of them were just watching.
No, I'm saying the people that were asked to do it, though, did it.
Yeah. Yep.
Wow.
They didn't ask me, but
Was there ever another type of situation, not necessarily the same thing, but where you were told you got to do something and you did?
Yeah, but more in like a, not to that level at all. But I was always ready with, what I would say, like to not have to cross a line like that.
Right.
Like that's another opposite to this, another side of this coin is when I said like you don't want to build a perfect person, you also don't want to build like a perfectly bad person either. You know, there are plenty of people in that world that have lines that they don't want to cross, and you're allowed to have one too, you know, when you build your cover. And so, luckily I was just never asked to do something like that.
But so you were prepared, you were responding in a sociopathic manner in character correctly, painful as that was, you were able to pull that off. But you're saying you were prepared for if they handed you the carrot peeler for you being able to get out of it without them sensing a problem.
Yeah.
How would you have gotten out of that?
So my approach would have been that I'm not here to be the carrot peeler guy. You know, I'm here to move the money. Like, if that's not enough and, you know, you need me to be involved in this shit, then, you know, just call somebody else. But I don't see what this has to do with me handling your money. And I also am kind of wondering what your leadership is going to think, that you're potentially compromising this, you know, relationship with me, because I'm about to bounce. I don't want to be a part of this shit.
There you go, turning it around to something more important. Okay, yeah. That makes sense. I might buy that too. That's a pretty good one. Good for you, I guess, like being able to pull that. See, that's why I could just never do what you guys did. Like I can't override that.
Yeah.
I'd be made very quickly. Yeah. All right, so the 3.5 years, though, that we were talking about in the biker gang, you're doing all this different shit. You mentioned the relationship with Teeth at the beginning. He was just kind of a crazy person, like kind of your way in. But how deep of close relationships did you make with other guys during that time?
Amazingly deep relationships. You know, like I'd watch some guys' kids, you know, while they were at work, you know, babysit for them. Yeah. Yeah. You want to get as close to people in that way as possible, right? Because, you know, I mentioned how it humanizes them. You want to humanize yourself to people as well, right? Like, and what it helped me do was I ended up with a lot of people in that world that wanted to protect me, you know, look out for me, like in a big brother-y kind of way, or things like that. And it kept me from a lot of dangerous situations. People would step in and take it for me, right? Like bar fights, for example.
Wow.
Yeah. So if they think you're like an asshole that doesn't give a shit about them, they're very less likely to do that for you, right? So that humanizing goes both ways.
Any of the guys, I mean, we're going to get to how you end up having to leave all this shit, which is many, many years from now. But any of the guys that you were in with at that time, do they know who you are now?
No.
And they wouldn't recognize you right now on camera?
It's not likely.
Why do you say it's not likely?
I don't look the same as I did back then. I mean, some people might figure it out, but a lot of those people are either dead or in prison, you know, at this time too. But somebody might recognize me. I think if they did, it's an interesting way to see me, right? Like, because I never hurt their organization. You know, I didn't testify. Nobody's in prison because of me. I'm sure they were confused as to what was going on with me after I left, but.
Okay. How did you... Well, actually, before I get to you leaving there, over these 3.5 years, you are not comfortable, obviously, saying specific countries and things like that, right?
I couldn't. No.
You couldn't. Yeah. That's classified. Yeah. Okay. So without doing that, you mentioned you're getting access to a lot of things internationally because it's an international organization. Mm-hmm. What... I'm right up against the line of stuff you can talk about, so I'm just trying to pick my words here. What types of things were you able to accomplish for the actual NOC CIA mission set during this time period that you were able to access through these guys?
So the money stuff, you know, like moving money overseas, and then also like the weapons buying stuff is tangentially connected to that world. So that opened up some doors. But mostly it's just the cover to travel, just the reason to be there. And then if somebody asks, like, who is this guy? We're going to look into him. If you're a made guy in a transnational organized crime group.
Yeah.
It's pretty good bona fides for, the feedback.
How does that work? Were you like? Do they have that like the mob where you're made? Like,
Yes.
Is that a term?
Yeah. So in the motorcycle community, you go hang around, you have prospects where you're trying to join, and you become a full patch. That's what they call a full patch member.
Okay. Is there like a ceremony?
Yeah, you get your patches, and each club
cool.
kind of does it differently. And they used to do it really interesting back in the 60s and stuff. But
What do you mean interesting in the 60s?
Oh, like beating the crap out of you, making you fight for your patch, pouring motor oil and alcohol all over you, urinating on you or something.
And they softened up over the years?
It depends on what club and what chapter. Each of the clubs are broken down into chapters, and they all kind of have their own personality, but some are pretty
Imagine you're like a fucking dentist by day. Like, all right, Timmy, your teeth look great. You go to the fucking biker gang at night. You're getting pissed on in motor oil. You're like, yeah, I love this.
Yeah, there's a good book with Billy Queen. He was an ATF agent that was a Green Beret in Vietnam. It's called Under and Alone, and he went into it was the Mongols motorcycle club that he had infiltrated. They talk about a lot of stuff in the book about that he had to go through getting his patch.
Were you when you started this relationship at the beginning, when you first start getting in there, as you already said, there's no like turn off time where you're Matt or whatever. But when you're at home, did you read any books or any material that could help you do your job with them more?
Yeah, so it's funny you ask me this because I've gotten this question several times recently, and people always assume, man, you would just want to turn off from it. But it wasn't like that for me. Like, I would read books about it. I would still like stay connected to the topic. I was always thinking about it. There wasn't a lot of, let's just go think about rainbows and butterflies for a while moments.
So you're accomplishing some of these things, money laundering or weapon stealing. When you say you'd have access to weapon stealing, is that because the gang would be purchasing weapons from groups that you would also want to get some weapons from? Or am I
close? It's usually, so if you think of like several hops of, like tiers of how people in your circles, they would usually know somebody that either knew somebody or that person knew somebody that was close to what I was looking for. But it would usually take a couple hops. But it's hard to remake that introduction level. Like, that's the key. That first guy that everybody's known for 20 years telling the first contact that I'm legit, that's the domino that starts everything. Instead of me just coming to the end and saying like, hey, you don't know who I am. Would you like to give me some classified technology, please?
But you would have to get away from, like, I'm going to pick a random country. Let's say you're in Belgium with these guys, and you're like, ooh, I can get through them to this other guy who sells these weapons. You'd have to get away from them in a different capacity and not be, biker mad anymore.
Right. So I wouldn't travel with them. I would just use them as a vouch.
Oh.
Yeah. Like, you can call Dave back there. You can ask him about me. Or, Dave, hey, I'm going to be traveling. I need to know somebody in this city. Can you give me somebody that knows their way around the city?
And they would never ask you why you're traveling?
You don't ask a lot of questions.
Like the biker guys?
Well, I mean, so that's one of the beautiful things about it is you don't sit around talking about crimes with each other in that world either, right? And they know that phones can be listened to, right? So they're not going to say like, yeah, what kind of shady shit are you going to be doing once I make this introduction? You don't talk about stuff like that. So that's a deterrent for them asking.
Did you ever get picked up or arrested or anything like that during this time?
I was arrested once, yeah.
What happened?
So the charge was aggravated assault.
I didn't do it.
No, I did it. I definitely did it.
That was on the list of can-dos.
Yeah. So I got rolled up in a group that had been involved in a violent encounter and charged with aggravated assault.
Am I allowed to ask, like, the nature of that violent encounter? Are you, like, fighting another biker gang in a bar, or?
Yeah, so that happened once. Well, that happened a lot of times. But one time that was really interesting that was very eye-opening for me about the humanity of these people was I'm sitting in a bar with 4 guys from the club that I'm in. And The bar is structured such that the front parking lot, you can have cars, but to get to the back, it's a very narrow thing, so you can only ride a motorcycle around back. And this is a bar that's like not on Google Maps. You know, there's no cameras in here. And we're sitting there, and then all of a sudden you just hear like these loud noises, like these bikes coming. And it's getting like, it'll vibrate if you have enough like bikes coming by a place. And we're sitting on the back porch, and all of a sudden we see the other club like boom, 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 like coming into the back. There was probably 40 people. And the guy I'm sitting right next to, who was an OG in that world, like the first thing he did is he reached inside his cut, snapped open where he had his pistol inside the cut. And then everybody didn't say anything. They just looked at each other and were like, yeah, here we go.
Are you armed too?
Yeah.
Okay. What like some of these guys, if they're dentists, lawyers, and stuff like that, like what motivates them to be a part of something like this?
Yeah, I think a lot of people are drawn to the brotherhood, the camaraderie of it. For one, a lot of people want the status. You know, they want to get treated like a rock star. You know, they want people to fear them or respect them or want them. And sometimes it's drugs. You know, it's a good life to be in if you want free drugs all the time, right? So a lot of different motivations. And it was really key for me to identify those motivations in the people I was around the whole time.
Play to them.
Right.
How did it come about, like leaving the gang? You just say like, I'm moving on, fellas.
Yeah, so it was the arrest that I'm talking about. And so I essentially, you know, told them that during my incarceration from my arrest initially, that I was approached by the feds for information. And I thought that, you know, I was going to have a long trial, you know, like a long process and delaying the trial and everything. And I thought it was a hazard for me because they were pressing me for information, and I wanted to step away during that time.
You weren't worried about being whacked over this?
No, not at the time. I mean, it's not like it used to be. Like, if you don't want to be there, you don't have to be there. It's not like a keeping you for life or else.
Right. It's a little different than the mob.
Yeah, and I basically, you know, kind of wussed out to them and said, you know, I'm getting so much pressure from law enforcement that, like, I don't want to keep doing it. My heart's not in it anymore.
And they just accepted that.
Yeah.
Wow. So you were actually
they took everything back, right? Like
Yeah.
anything that had the logo on it and stuff like that, and told me to keep my mouth shut about them, you know.
It's like turning your badge in.
Yeah. Yeah, kind of.
Wow. So you were actually incarcerated, like you were in jail.
Just in jail, yeah. I didn't go to prison or anything like that. Yeah.
CIA took care of it?
No. So they let me out on bail, and they're like, let's just go through the regular lawyer process here, like to not yank this. And so it was a year and a half that I was like pending on. I was out, right, like doing whatever, but we let it go, and they ended up dropping it. But
Does your corporate job find out about this?
Nope.
How did you keep that from them?
I just didn't bring it up.
I got a hard stop at 3. Got to meet with my lawyer. Don't ask any questions.
Yeah.
Okay, so you're still getting access to some places around the world and things like that.
Yeah, it was just a little speed bump. I got right back to it after that. And if anything, it like added to the credibility for me.
Did you have any contact with your mentor during this time? Like, is he involved with you in any way?
Not at this point, no.
Was he ever involved with you again?
No.
Do you talk with him today?
Nope.
You've never seen him again?
Not since, it's been years, yeah. The first one, you're talking about the
guy in the mansion.
Yeah. But the guy that was my boss after that, who was with me for almost the entire time, he's like a father to me. We talk almost all the time.
What does a boss look like in that role? You mentioned earlier there's classified ways you guys are able to communicate and everything. I would imagine some of that is actually vocal, but, you know, not on your fucking iPhone or something. Like, what? You're meeting with him in person sometimes, discreetly?
Most of the time.
That's most of it?
That's how it would happen, yeah.
And so you're close with him today?
Very close, yeah.
And what type, without revealing classified stuff, like, Is this someone who sits at a desk at Langley? Or is this another off-books kind of guy?
I would say it's a hybrid. Like he sat at a different location, but it's a government, place. It's not as well known to be affiliated, but yeah.
Do you guys have safe houses?
Yeah.
I would imagine all across America that you have access to it anytime.
Yeah, I had one when I was doing this.
How off the beaten path was it?
If I was going straight from where I was at, it was probably like 40 minutes outside of where I was working, straight there.
And you knew every possible way to get there to try to evade detection.
Yeah, but it was, structured in a way. It wasn't, so safe house would be a bad term, more like a cover house, right? Like, So if they wanted to show up, it would look real. It wasn't like this empty, thing you see in the movies, right? Yeah. Like there's pictures that are backstopped. It looks like a real life.
Wow. Is that where, when you'd meet with this guy, I mean, sometimes you're meeting with him in public places, but would a lot of times be in a safe house?
Sometimes we just meet in a bar, or sometimes it would be an offsite that was more secure for certain things.
And what would he talk to you directly about the criminal activity you're doing, or did he not really care about that? Was he more mission based and like, all right, what are we doing to get to this place to do this thing with this guy for CIA?
He cared about everything that I wanted to be talking about. And, as far as you saying like going home and turning it off or whatever, this was my outlet. He was a therapist to me the entire time.
Had he done stuff like this himself?
Yes.
So he knew. I think about that, some of those scenes in The Departed all the time when Leo's like, he's on these drugs and he's somehow keeping it straight in person, but behind the scenes he's like losing it a little bit.
Yeah.
Did you ever have that?
Yeah. So I was actually in a strip club one time and I smoked something that was laced. I didn't know what it was ahead of time. I ended up on this couch in the back of the strip club just losing my mind for what seemed like forever. And all I was thinking about was like, am I saying it? Am I telling? Like,
right.
Yeah.
I should have asked that more clearly. When you would go meet with this guy, did you ever, as you said, it was like an outlet, did you ever as an outlet just fucking lose it? Like, if you were just in a scenario where you watch someone take a carrot peeler to someone's face or something, you know what I mean?
Yeah. So I was much more emotional with him than any other interaction that I had in life at the time. Yeah. And, even in ways like, that I regretted, like looking back, like, man, I was kind of rude to him, at the time. Like, and he was just a sponge. He would soak it up and let me be who I needed to be when we talked.
Because like you said, he did it. He understands.
Yeah.
I can't imagine having to be a character at all times, having no ability to break it, even in an empty room to myself, frankly, because you can't really turn it off. And then suddenly you're in the one place where it is like, the panic room or whatever.
Yeah.
And you can go in there and just let it out. And maybe it's only for an hour and you got to turn it right back on when you walk out of there. But I can't even imagine what that emotional would even feel like.
Yeah, it's extremely powerful. It's dangerous too because, once you let that tap open, you're not quite sure how much needs to come out or how long. And, you want to be able to get back into thinking straight. But
Did you feel, I mean, you were so mission focused and you've mentioned it a couple times today, you believed very much in what you were doing and, working on behalf of the United States and stuff. But did it ever feel like, Matt was being left behind? Like your life, your, I don't know, normal shit, having a family, things like that.
Sure. But that's not what was part of the contract, Yeah. That wasn't the deal. So it was no one's obligation to ensure that I was having a life, It's a voluntary assignment,
Did you have any contact with your family during this time?
No, not really, not much.
Did they know what you were doing?
No, definitely not.
Like, not exactly what you were doing, but did they know we haven't seen him and we haven't talked to him literally because he's doing some sort of government shit where, He can't do that? Or did they think you had just abandoned them?
More the latter. Yeah.
Really?
Yeah.
That had to be hard on you.
Yeah, when people, they don't know that and they misperceive, it's just because, you don't care. When you do, that can be a mental weight.
So you could never just like call up your mom?
Not at the time. And, you can't cross these worlds over, and so you got to stay compartmented. And there are ways, like people in that role, they do stay in contact with their family. There have been people that did it. I just chose not to personally as much.
Who's the most dangerous guy you met during that time? That's not classified.
Dangerous, violent?
Sure.
I mean, definitely some of the people in the cartel world, just because of their capacity to not be affected by some stuff you can't even think of, on your own.
I wasn't even there yet, but yeah, that doesn't surprise me at all. I'm talking about the time you were in the biker gang.
Yeah, there's some dangerous cats, Yeah. You meet some people that are there just because they like the violent side of it, and that's what they're looking for.
Okay. All right, so you have that 1.5 year period where you're kind of in limbo. Mm-hmm. You're still working the corporate job. You're not telling them you're in limbo. The CIA says, let's let this get handled naturally. Mm-hmm. It gets handled naturally. I would imagine you got like a probation sentence or something like that.
Yeah, it was like a year. If I did something naughty during that year, it all comes crashing back kind of thing.
Right. Now, just a quick aside question. Today, is that wiped from your record? Because, yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
And you were under an assumed name, right? At the time?
Some of the time, yeah. So in that world, sometimes you do things in true name, sometimes you do things in an assumed name.
So did you get probation in the name of Matthew Hedger?
That I can't answer.
Okay.
I don't want to be specific on that, please.
Okay, no problem. But either way, like, you're good on that now.
Yeah, everything's good. Yeah, it went away on its own.
All right. So you told these guys, I'm going to be leaving. This is too much, whatever. They made you turn the shit in, and it was cool.
Yep.
And during that 1.5 years, you're still doing some of your money laundering stuff where you can based on your connections around the world. All right, Cool. How do you get introduced to the world of the cartels?
So that was through the club originally. Right?
Okay.
So that wasn't a target set. Again, this was more like just leveling up into a better, cover for what I was up to. And the great thing about, I'll say the great thing, the advantageous thing about them was their money was so much higher, right? So when you're laundering money, you need a forest to hide your tree in,
mm-hmm.
right? So you can only move so much based on legitimate money,
yep.
or money that's obfuscating the true thing. And these people had so much money, it allowed us to get a lot higher with how much we were moving for our own personal reasons.
Bigger scales, essentially.
Exactly.
Okay. Now, you made that relationship while you were in the biker gang. How did that, like, what kind of person did you meet, and how did you keep that relationship, like, on your own?
Yeah, so I met somebody, that was essentially a bulk cash smuggler for the cartel. That was their job, is to pick up all the cash after sales had been made and then move that money. And so I made a relationship with that person, and I was able to take some off their hands, help them with what they were doing. And
what do you mean take it off there? Oh, like launder it?
Yep.
Okay. So that 1.5 years, you never reached out to that connection. What changed so that how did you reestablish that?
So I didn't. So the 1.5 years is right at close to the end, right? And so, so it's the full end of the biker stuff, right? So I did like that.
Okay, got it.
Right.
Yeah.
And so I still have all these other connections out there when I'm not talking to them. I'd pretty much use them for what I needed, and it was all good.
Okay.
I had my own network at that time.
And somewhere within this network, you then have a new meeting where suddenly you get pulled into that world.
Yep. And I'm keeping that going after that. So I essentially hopped off of them and onto the Mexican side.
Okay. Real quick. I got to go to the bathroom. What time is your flight out of here?
It leaves at 6.
And you changed it. It's going somewhere else now, right?
Yeah, DC.
Okay. Yeah. I got to either this is going to be the end of the episode and we're bringing him back, or we're going to change flights and there will be another episode after that. We'll figure it out. But if you haven't subscribed, please subscribe. We'll be right back. Thank you guys for checking out this clip. If you haven't already subscribed, please subscribe and hit the like button on this video. It is a huge, huge help. And if you'd like to check out this clip's full podcast episode, that link is in the description below or right here. And finally, you can follow me on Instagram and X by using the links in my description below.